Good evening, everyone. Hey, and welcome to our program. This is St. Louis Live. And at this time, I'd like to introduce to you the evening's program MC. Let's give a warm welcome to Dave Rudden.
Everyone will have to bow to Vince before we leave this evening. Hello, everybody. Yes, and welcome. Welcome to St. Louis Live, take 2. We have a larger audience than we thought we were going to have, and I'm sure the extra 50 people are going to come in after the homecoming parade is over. Yes, I tried to get my daughter to the park in order to go ahead and go to homecoming, because the junior poms are going to, the junior high school poms are going to be dancing in that particular parade. So I just had to leave her at Soldiers and Sailors Park and tell her to walk. She didn't really like that part. But anyway, St. Louis Live. Last time I speculated what it would be like and what St. Louis Alive would be like, whether or not he would look like the guy with the mustache in the Adoration Chapel, the white guy who hides behind Father in the altar, or the rusty guy who's behind the greenhouse way back there. Well, apparently, he has a life of its own, because, we all remember years and years and years, what I like to call St. Louis the Rusty was out here on a rock behind church. And, if you ever talked to Father Sternman, he really had a sweet place for St. Louis the Rusty. And that sweet place was behind the greenhouse. Okay? So lately, though, he's been floating around, right? He was up on the rock, he was behind the greenhouse, now he's in front of the rectory over here. It's kind of like a St. Louis Where's Waldo. I think we should get him like a striped sweater and a little stocking cap. We never know when he's going to show up, during the Adoration Chapel. St. Louis the Rusty. Right? We're in here at Heartbreaker Hall and just turn around. St. Louis the Rusty. He's just somewhere all around the place. Maybe we should have him like in that little box, like the traveling statue of Fatima. Right? So you could just wake up in the morning, hit your alarm clock, and it's just St. Louis the Rusty. He's just there. It's kind of a frightening idea, most definitely. But maybe if Father Sternman comes back, he can just chase him back behind the greenhouse. Okay, tonight on St. Louis Live, we're going to be talking about prayer and our experiences with prayer, how we learned how to pray, the difficult times we have praying, and that made me think. One time, I was with my mother and my wife and my now almost 20-year-old, but probably about 8-year-old Emma at this particular time. No, it couldn't have even been 8 because Brennan wasn't born yet, so I'm going to say at least 6 or 5-year-old Emma. And as we go north from Fort Pierce, Florida, where I was raised and my mother lived, in order to be able to change the interstates to go to Disney, you have to get off in a town called Yeehaw Junction. It really exists, honest to God. There is a town called Yeehaw Junction. All right? And when I was getting off, I went in the wrong direction to go towards the interstate or whatever road I needed to particularly travel on, and I quickly noticed it, and I pulled off on the side of the road to find out that it was a soft shoulder, and I hit the brakes and I'm sliding along, and the rocks are flying, and my mother says, "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph!" And then Emma says, "Are we praying?" And then Tracy says, "Only when your father is driving, dear." I tell you, I have many, many experiences. Many of us go ahead and we have our prayer time when we're at the wheel. We have a lot of that. I used to do my rosaries and things when I had a 50-minute drive in order to work in Stark County. Well, I decided when I was working in Cambridge, Illinois, from here, it's about an hour and a half, during Lent, I decided that I was going to say a Hail Mary for every semi-tractor trailer that came in the other direction. Apparently, I had never been on I-80 before. I'm still making up the time and saying, oh my gosh, I should have given up liquor. So saying the prayers, going ahead, and it's like, how do we go ahead and learn what the prayers, there are certain cultures that have some very specific prayers, and I think it's very beautiful. The Irish have this very lovely prayer about our enemies, and they say, Lord, let us pray for our enemies, and let us turn their hearts so that they love us. And if they don't turn their hearts, let's let them turn their ankles so we know them by their limping. It's really, really important that we go ahead and we figure those things out. So prayer, where does it fit in our lives? How can we go ahead and make it an active and regular part of our lives? And how can we build that relationship with Christ and with our Lord? And that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about tonight. And for that, tonight we're going to go ahead and, I imagine we're going to go ahead and bring up our first guest. Now, our first guest has been a member of our parish, I believe, for 12 years. And everything I know about him is on this clipboard. Actually, what I do know about him is that he sits about 2 pews ahead of me in church. All right? Steve has worked in Princeton for 40 years. He's been a member of our parish for 12 years, and he went ahead and was in the Catholic Penitentiary from the time he was in Sacred Heart School, all the way through Alaman Catholic School, and went to Truman University. He's married to Denise, his daughter is Leah, and he has 2 grandkids, Brenna and Hayden. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Steve Kelly. Is this live? There we go. This is going to be yours, okay? Please have a seat. You'll forgive me for looking at my notes, Steve. As I have a tendency, last time I said I was able to not use my notes whatsoever. That's when I had the answers from people so far ahead of time. So you'll forgive me if I don't memorize everything as it goes right here. All right, so Steve, one of the things that really stood out for me is your experience about learning to pray and with your parents. Can you tell me a little bit about that prayer time and your experience with your parents in prayer?
It's a long time ago.
Are you live?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Oh, okay.
You can hear him out there? Because I can hear myself.
Yeah, I can hear him. Can you hear me? Okay, I just gotta get on, I guess.
I think you're going to have to eat your mic a little bit.
Okay. That's a long time ago, but I grew up right before television, and so we had a lot of family time together, and we always went to church, and we prayed the rosary every Sunday night.
Who was the leader?
We took turns.
Okay, all right.
We did it on our knees.
Oh my.
Nobody stood up in my family. My older brother made sure that.
Ouch.
Yeah. He was something when it came to prayers. But anyway.
Something. Excuse me. There's a story there. Why was your brother something when it came to prayers?
Well, we shared the same bed, little twin bed, and I would always try to get to bed before him because I didn't want to say my prayers.
Ah.
So that just didn't work because he would come in and he goes, "Did you say your prayers?" And I go, "Yes, I did." And he just whacked me.
Human lie detector.
Oh yeah, get down on your knees and say your prayers. So we would say them together. And after that, I just gave up. If I was in bed, even if I said them, he would make me get out and get on my knees with him. He was a special guy.
I will see, this is too little too late. I'm almost wondering if when your brother came to the room and he said, have you done your prayers? You just said, I'm just waiting for you. You know what?
I was pretty young. No.
All right, so the rosary. And you guys, every Sunday, and you would rotate parts, saying, you would rotate who was the leader? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting. What is your favorite mystery of the Rotary? I'm going off script here, I know.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Oh, last one? Last one.
Yeah.
Oh, they're all great.
All right.
I guess the birth of Jesus would be my favorite.
All right, let's hear it for the birth of Jesus. You had to have that part, right?
Yes.
Most definitely. All right. Thanks a lot there. All right. When specifically do you pray? It seems like you got a lot of options here. You use your time to pray.
It wasn't always like that.
Okay.
I want everybody here to know that the St. Louis Parish, the people here have been wonderful. I love going to church here, and whenever I go to Mass, I can feel your love and your prayers. And my wife feels that way too, and I just want to say thank you.
Give a big hand for yourselves out there. Thank you so much. We are a community.
Yes, when you get older, you pray just about any chance you can find.
I see that here, you know? These opportunities that you take in the different places that you're doing that.
I used to drive a lot, and that's a real easy time because you're by yourself.
Most definitely.
And I would start with the rosary, the chaplet, and then, thankfully I had EWTN radio and relevant radio, and plus things were going on in my life, so I would talk to God, cry, but nobody saw me, so
Great
it
place.
didn't make any difference. Yeah.
Most definitely. I see here that one of the places that you like to pray is cutting the grass. I'm wondering if you'd like to pray at my house every week.
I can get a rosary in cutting the grass,
All right.
and so I do that.
That's a good rosary, right? Because my daughter likes to race through it. My daughter is like, oh, come on. It's almost like name that tune. Well, I can get my rosary done in 12 minutes.
Yes. I like it slow.
Most definitely.
Because I'm slow, I guess. But
No, but it's a real prayer that way.
yes, I watched EWTN Rosary, and I'll watch tonight at 8:30.
We'll get you out by that time.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
But that's a good rosary to follow.
All right. Now, if you're ready, there's a special, powerful experience that made it both difficult and that, developed your life in prayer.
I don't know of any one difficult moment that helped me develop my prayer life. I mean, when anybody gets sick, just like everybody else, when you have a problem, the first thing you do is you go to God and you pray. And if somebody's sick or somebody needs help, my mom would always say, we're just not praying enough. We have to pray harder. She said that on everything. I had a lot of deaths in my life, and so you pray.
They seem to come very quickly, one after the other as well.
Yeah, at that moment that we talked about it.
Right, there was some talk in there.
That one came quick,
And one of the things I hear, and it was almost a theme, and it's not just you, Steve, is about one of those difficulties in life, and we talk about angry prayers. The times that we continue, that we pray, but that one of those feelings is anger.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. When we get to that point, we get angry. It doesn't last long, and you ask God to forgive you, because in the end, He knows what's best. And when I was younger, I was angry. As I get older, I don't get quite as angry. I think of the things that might have been different if He would have made that miracle happen. He could have cured one of these deaths, and all of us could have seen it, and maybe it would have changed our lives, but maybe it would have kept us out of salvation too. Maybe we wouldn't have changed our lives. And after a miracle, if you didn't change your lives, I don't know how that would go over.
True.
So, and I talked about my brother dying at 17. I didn't realize it until later on when I was talking to my mom about it when she was 80. He died as a junior in high school at 17 and 65, but he wasn't a good student. He wasn't going to college. He would have went to Vietnam. There was no doubt about it. And I think God spared that part of his life and for us. And that didn't come until later on, but that was a gift from God to give to my mom before she passed, because she never thought about that. But he would have never wanted to go to Vietnam. He just wasn't that way.
Well, at least he taught you and made you pray.
Yes, he did.
Most definitely. And one other person, an example of a role model. We know your parents, we know your brother, Saint Stephen. How has Saint Stephen taught you how to pray?
I just sort of threw that in there.
Oh, okay, sorry. Well, the next question is...
My first name is Stephen. And I knew Saint Stephen because my name.
Okay.
And so I pray to him all the time. He's one of the saints I pray to. He was the first martyr.
Okay.
So I was sort of proud to be named after him. Stephen Mark John Kelly is my name, so I'm pretty safe in that regard.
Most definitely, you're covered. Is that with confirmation names or those old birth names?
John is the confirmation.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Yeah. All right, good thing that we don't get, as Catholics, another name for every single sacrament, because that would be really difficult. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Steve Kelly. Just slide down, you're going to be around here. We're going to have other guests, but we're going to take a little break. The next commercial is for Mimes Anonymous.
She's saying beautiful things, I promise. Beautiful, beautiful things that
I remember Father owed me money once.
Let's go ahead and bring on the next guest.
All right, let's bring on the next guest. Let's hear that commercial. All right, gotta go. Look at my nose, look at my nose, look at my nose, look at my nose. Our next guest is very well known to our band director over here. She's a member of the CCW. She was a CCW Volunteer of the Year in 2018. And she is the organizer of the Glimmers of Comfort Support Group for Grief. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Jeannie Galsomino. Me next. You don't get to kiss Vince very often? Not at a gig. Okay, all right. I thought he had some kind of rule or something. Now, once my lips are on the trumpet, honey.
A long time you didn't kiss me because of that trumpet.
Oh, that's right. Were his lips too special to be gay? Oh my gosh.
I was known as Hot Lips.
Oh, you were known as Hot Lips. By your trumpet only?
No, I mean, all the women.
All of them. How did you make your way through the crowds, Jeannie? Oh, you stayed home. Okay. Stayed home polishing his second trumpet. Making sure that his armature, did I say that correctly? Your armature was good? Yes. All right. So, Jeannie was a little bit concerned because she had to go old school when she sent me the answers. Jeannie's answers were sent to me via her writing in her Catholic school cursive.
My computer crashed.
Yes, her computer crashed. So she had to have this moment where she wrote it, and she was so upset to see whether or not I could read it. And I told her that her Catholic school rheumatoid arthritis cursive is 90% better than my public school 20-year-olds. All right, so there's absolutely no problem with that. So, let's start, we're going to go, this is the difficult part, about a particular time in your life that prayer strengthened your relationship with the Lord. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
It is not as live as mine. Tell you what, I'm going to hand you my mic, and I'll talk on that one because, you know, I was at church, and I was a cantor like about 3 weeks ago, and this woman touched me on the arm after Mass, and I thought she was going to tell me, oh, what a beautiful voice you have. She said, you don't need a mic.
Actually, I'm going to read a testimonial because it's just going to be easier for me to read it than to try to wing it because it's about Danny. So just bear with me. I always thought I had a close relationship with God, but that changed drastically in 2012. Danny had just gone through a very traumatic divorce in November of 2011 and was ready to go on with his life. Danny was having some health issues in early February of 2012. He was in New York where he worked 2 to 3 days a week. He experienced terrific pain in his right leg and he could hardly write his name. We initially thought he had a minor stroke and that everything would be just fine. He went to his family doctor who did some tests. The next day we received a frantic call from Danny because his doctor wanted to see him as quickly as possible. We couldn't get to Addison soon enough to go with him, so we met him at his condo when he came back from his appointment. He literally collapsed in our arms, just sobbing. He said he had to go to Central DuPage Hospital in Warrenville immediately. We called Amy and she drove from Peoria to be with us. When a team of oncologists walked into his hospital room, we knew something was terribly wrong. Danny was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, which had spread to his brain and spine. Ironically, he never smoked. When Danny found out his diagnosis, he was so scared and emotional trauma was heart-wrenching. He had 2 young children. He knew he would never get to see them grow up. I couldn't pray. I actually didn't want to pray. I was really upset with God. How could he do this to my son? In a matter of minutes, my faith in God collapsed. I totally fell apart. I reached out to Father Sterneman by phone. He came to be with our family in the hospital. Although he didn't know Danny well, he opened his heart to console Danny. Father spent quite a while with him. He gave him his blessing. He gave us his blessing before he left. When we walked into Danny's room, Danny was totally at peace. He didn't talk much about their conversation, but he said, and I quote, "Mom, Father told me for all the people on earth who want me to stay here, there were so many more people in heaven who want me to be with God." If it hadn't been for Danny's courage and faith, I would have walked away from God that day. His strength opened my heart to pray again. My son's acceptance of his cancer made me realize that instead of being angry with God, I needed him now more than ever. When Vince and I knew we would be caregivers for our son, I prayed for God to give us as much time as possible with him. In the early months, Danny tried to live as normal a life as possible, and we all worked very hard to make happy memories for Casey and Nathan. They spent the summer months with us and weekends with us. Danny couldn't have surgery, but had intense radiation treatments for the tumors in his lungs, brain, and spine, followed by 2 infused chemo treatments, which almost killed him. He had to stop taking chemo, but began a clinical study with the daily chemo pill. The quality of his life began to slip away almost every day following his treatments. There were so many emergency room visits, mostly in the late night hours, from the horrible side effects from his treatments. At that point in time, I prayed to God to be a merciful God, and let his journey end. Even though Danny experienced terrible headaches, constant fatigue, nausea, skin rashes, diarrhea, constipation, bad reactions to the medications, weakness, constant pain, and emotional distress, he didn't want to leave his kids. He was supposed to die in 6 months, but he fought a very hard battle for 25 months. We had a beautiful last Christmas together, and his kids loved having Amy with us. In January 2014, Danny had a horrific episode stemming from his brain tumors. He had to go to the ER because he became very belligerent, and anybody who knew Danny knew he was the sweetest kid there ever was, and had to be restrained by 3 orderlies. He was also trying to talk, but his words made no sense. He looked at us so angrily because he didn't understand we didn't understand what he was trying to say. He was given medication that put him to sleep. The next morning he woke up and didn't remember anything that happened the previous night. From that point in time, his health deteriorated rapidly, and every day I prayed once again for God to be merciful and to end his journey. Danny was admitted into the hospital on March 8, 2014. He could hardly walk. During the last 10 days of his life, his legs were filled with blood clots, and the tumors in his back became so painful that just moving caused him so much pain. And I prayed constantly for God to take our son. On Saturday morning, March 15, Danny began screaming in horrific pain and began throwing up blood. The doctors wanted to take him into surgery. Thank God our Amy was with us. She was the medical power of attorney and wouldn't allow it, as she knew her brother was dying. She was the one who told Danny it was time. We called hospice, who administered morphine to make him comfortable, and he pretty much went into a coma. He did open his eyes one last time for a brief few seconds to tell us that he loved us all very much, and that he beat his prognosis, and that we needed to watch out for his season Cubs tickets. He was in a coma from Saturday until Tuesday, and he went with God on March 18th. He would have celebrated his 43rd birthday on March 21st. Danny was so much more than just these few paragraphs, because he was an inspiration to many and never complained about anything. He summed up his cancer simply by saying, "It is what it is." Most importantly for me, he made me realize how much I really needed God. I never would have been able to walk this journey if it hadn't been for having God by my side. He heard my prayers, even in my heart when I was too exhausted to pray them verbally. That's Danny's story.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy Wilson. Now, I heard you talk about Danny's ability to have acceptance when it comes to that, but it took some time. Yes, you went through that experience, you saw him accept it, but there were other experiences in your life where you found, peace and acceptance a little bit later. You found a different way of looking at that. And how did you do that?
2 years after Danny passed away, Linda McCabe asked me to take a Cursillo, or make a Cursillo, and I finally felt that I could do it. I was ready. I wasn't ready the first year, I was ready the second year. I can honestly say that Cursillo changed my life. I can't give you the details because it's sort of a secret thing, the weekend is. But I walked away from that Cursillo with a peace and comfort in my heart that I never knew I could have. Yeah, I still miss Danny terribly and I hurt terribly, but there was an acceptance there. So if you ever have an opportunity and you haven't taken the Cursillo, do it, because you're going to find that it will change your life.
And I can give you an application if you so desire. Thank you very much. So, I mean, but also your life has been surrounded by prayer warriors. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, most of you know who know me that I had cancer. I was diagnosed, I think last March 1st with breast cancer. And I had a real hard time with it, not because I was afraid of the cancer. I didn't want Vince to be a caregiver again. So I went home after I left the doctor's office and I looked up and I said, really, God? You know, I'm an insulin-dependent diabetic. I have rheumatoid arthritis, I have tremors, I have high blood pressure, and I thought, okay, I don't know if I can handle this. I don't know if I could go through cancer. I didn't know if I was going to have a mastectomy or if I was going to have cancer in my lymph nodes or if I was going to have chemo and radiation. And I just sort of thought, I don't even think I can pray. I don't think I can pray. But in the meantime, something beautiful happened. All of you people prayed for me. And I see so many of my prayer warriors out there right now. And you're the reason that when I went and had my surgery, they didn't find any cancer in my lymph nodes. I only had to have a lumpectomy. I didn't need chemo. I just had 16 radiation treatments. And I'm on a hormone pill that gives me hot flashes. And I'm 76 years old.
Makes you feel young again.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I don't feel that young anymore, but yeah. So anyway.
So what I'm hearing again is that prayer is supported and we are supported because we are the church. Again, give applause and thanks to yourself right now for
Exactly.
prayers and the groups. Please, applaud. It's this community that supports those prayers. Now, one thing, before we wrap up, I want to go ahead and ask, you said that you had a special story about your first confession.
Okay, like I said, I'm going to be 76 years old, or 77 years old. And I went to St. Joe's Catholic School in Joliet. It was a very Sylvanian, strict Catholic school. I had nuns for 12 years. If you could believe that, I lived through that. But when I had to make my first confession, there were about 30 kids in my class. And back then, the confessionals were dark, and you had this curtain in front of them. And it was a rainy Saturday morning, and I was raised, unfortunately, taught by these nuns that our God was a judgmental God, that you were judged for everything. They didn't tell us he was a loving God. So by the time I had to take that, I was the last one in line. Picture this, all these little kids in front of me. And first of all, I didn't even know what I was going to say for sins. I kept thinking, okay, I didn't eat 3 Cheerios this morning. Does that count for a sin? And then I said, I don't have any siblings, so I can't say I fight with my family. And then I thought, but I did call Loretta Dozak fat because she was in first grade and we got our hands all slapped with a ruler and she didn't because the nun said she was too fat and she wouldn't feel it anyway. So I just decided I'm going to walk in there and I'm going to make up some sins. Well, I did, and I couldn't hardly remember the act of contrition, so I sort of winged my way through that. But all of a sudden, I got so nervous that I actually peed my pants. And thank God I was the last one going into that confessional because there was a little stream of water going down the aisle. And luckily I had a dress on. So I ran out. I don't even know what my penance was. I don't think I ever said it. I just beelined out of church and I ran all the way home and I cried and I cried and I cried. And I told my mom, I said, I think I have to go back and go to confession again because I don't think I did it right the first time around.
At least when you ran away, you left a trail so they could find you.
Yes. I just want to add one more thing. One of the things that I have found about going through my grief with Danny was the courage, with the help of Sister Ann Germain, to begin the Glimmer of Comfort Grief Support Group. We had one at my house Tuesday night. There were 8 of us mothers who have lost children. We cry together, we laugh together. I have been so comforted by these women, and I just hope if anybody else ever needs to reach out, if you've lost a child, if you've had a miscarriage, if you've had a suicide, if you've had a child die in an accident or an illness, come see our group. We're very informal, we're not structured, we don't have rules, we don't take minutes, but it's the best group of women I've ever been associated with. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for you. Back to my notes. I should prepare a little bit better. All right. So, our next guest was born and raised in Tisco, Illinois. He was married to Ginger for 49 years and still is. He has 2 daughters, Amy and Kathy. He served in the Air Force, including a tour in Vietnam. He owns the Bureau Valley Chief in Tiscoa. He was ordained a deacon of the Catholic Church May 21st, 1988, first it's assigned to St. Mary's Church in Tiscoa, and here at St. Louis Church, also assigned Director of Pastoral Care at St. Margaret's Hospital, and the only man who, when he leaves the pulpit after singing the gospel, we all go, aww. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. John Murphy, Deacon John Murphy. Thank you. Please have a seat. All right, I just have one important question. So I was doing a little bit of math here. All right, you've been married for 49 years, and you've been a deacon for 31 years. So how did Ginger feel that after 18 years of marriage, you just said, you know, I want to become a priest? Yes, I believe that should be live.
Well, you're still running that today, so.
Oh, okay, all right.
But it was, you know, we were young and we had 2 young kids, 2 young daughters. So it was quite a change for us as a family to make that decision to become a deacon. But the diocese is very smart. They require the wives to come with the husband for all the formation. So for 5 years, Ginger was always there with me. So she got an idea what we were getting into over that time. And I can't believe it's been 31 years, it's flown. So Ginger's been a trooper all along and has always supported me. So that's, the diocese does not want to ordain someone to one sacrament and destroy another one. So that's why they've been very careful on deacons and their wives and trying to maintain that balance.
Okay, so a big round of applause for Ginger.
So one quick thing for deacons, we can be married when we're ordained. If our wife passed away, we cannot marry again. So all deacons protect their wives. It's the last one to get.
Okay, all right. So, and you can't get married again after you're married?
No.
Okay, all right. All right. So let me get to my notes here. Now, you know what? I think people say there is a great deal of prayer that goes on in foxholes. So it may be a very difficult experience because it's difficult for a lot of people in the experience of war, but I am wondering about your relationship with God because I'm doing the math here, you told me, didn't you graduate from high school in 1966, and you were in Vietnam in 1968? So I'm just thinking that I have a 20-year-old daughter right now, and I can do that math. So can you please tell me about prayer and being there?
It's probably where prayer became the most important to me. I was a young kid and not much experience in the real world, being raised in Tuscaloosa and then going to college at SIU in Carbondale. But the Air Force at that time, Vietnam was escalating, and so all of us who were through basic training were sent to Vietnam. So I got there when I was 20 years old. And that's probably when my prayer life began to really grow. And I was petrified. I was scared to death. Because the rockets came in every day, and it was the first time in my life I didn't know whether I would live for the day. So in a way, I was kind of truly forced to go to prayer and to learn to trust God and to put my life in His hands. So that's when I started to mature the most, was because I had no place else to go. And I remember the first week just wanting to go AWOL somewhere, but there's no way to get out. So at night you turn into prayer. And that began just saying, God help me survive this while I'm here. And then throughout the year that just grew, and my trust in God just got stronger. And so did my prayer, not formal words, but just my thoughts during that day, what I thought I needed at that time.
Well, thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for your service. You have had the trying experience of having 2 children go through some life-threatening experiences, and you were along with them. So, begin with each as you so desire, but this is pretty incredible.
Well, the first was my youngest daughter, Kathy. When she was 22 months old, she was executed in a grocery store in Tuscaloosa.
That was 22 months, by the way.
She was with our babysitter at the grocery store getting some lunch meat, and I was only EMT in Tuscaloosa at that time, and the ambulance phone rang saying they needed somebody down at the local grocery store. So I ran down there, told the ambulance to meet me there. Did not realize it was Kathy until the people parted, and there she was on the floor, and her heart had stopped and she wasn't breathing. So I started CPR, and we waited for the ambulance, but it didn't come. There were no drivers. So finally a friend of mine drove us to Princeton, to the hospital. And the ambulance finally did arrive afterwards, picked up my wife Ginger, and they followed behind us some distance back. But they radioed ahead, they were coming in with a young girl in cardiac arrest. So they were waiting for us, and they got Kathy's heart started, but she wouldn't breathe. So they called the mobile intensive care unit out of St. Francis to come and get her. Took her to Peoria, and they allowed Ginger to stay with her in pediatric ICU. She began to breathe that night, but still in a coma. Woke up the next morning and asked for a popsicle. I call it miracle recovery. At Perry Memorial, when she came in, that day there were 5 doctors in the emergency room. That never happens. So they're all able to dive into different parts of Kathy's body to help get IVs in and get defibrillators started and that kind of thing. So, and it paralyzed Ginger dying. We didn't know what to do. We couldn't do anything other than pray. And our priest at Tuscaloosa came up to the hospital and just came out into the ER waiting room and just gave Ginger and I both a hug and said, "We'll put it in God's hands." And that's what we did. And luckily, Kathy was able to come out of it. They tested her for 20 years for brain damage, and nothing developed. So now Kathy's an attorney and doing well. And then Amy was our second problem. Amy was trying to run with Kathy, do a 5K run, and she could not keep up. She couldn't breathe. And Amy's 2.5 years older than Kathy. So she thought something was wrong. She went to the doctor, and they just said it's bronchitis, pneumonia, you'll be fine. And it continued on for a while. And finally, Amy forced the doctor to get a chest x-ray, and they took the x-ray and they diagnosed fibrosing mediastinitis, which is a mass in your lung growing for no apparent reason, and it was terminal. So we were devastated, and we came home, and I sent him his pathology to Vanderbilt University, Dr. Lloyd, who's a specialist in that disease, and he agreed to look at her pathology, reviewed that, and came back and said, yeah, I think that's what she's got. We go to Mayo's and get a second opinion. And Mayo's, it turned out it was cancer, not fibrosing mediastinitis, it was Hodgkin's lymphoma. So for us, that was a miracle. She was able to have something that was treatable. And then she went to remission about a year later. But I think those 2 times were when Ginger and I were the most at a loss for prayer. Each one at a given time, but both we had no control over what was happening to us. Things just came out of nowhere, and I remember the day vividly that Catherine was executed, and I remember the day vividly at the hospital when Amy calls and Dad, there's something wrong with me. And, you know, it's just the world kind of stops. And you get very mad at God. And both kids did nothing wrong. Catherine was 22 months old. But how can this happen? And we were mad at the store owner because the store owner knew there was a short in the meat locker, but he didn't fix it. So there's just a whole world of things that we viewed as negatives, but yet we kept our prayer going that just whatever God's will, we could accept that in some way. And things worked out for both kids. That's helped me with other families at the hospital when they're facing difficult times and we need to pray and they have no hope. And you know, I can tell them that I've been there, but it doesn't always help them at that time, but I know that God can do many more of those things.
I can't help but go ahead and have my own story of Brennan when she was 5 years old. And here she was at Dave and Sue's house, and she made a choking noise and fell to the floor. And they took her to the hospital and said, oh, she must have choked on something. And then 20 minutes later, she had another seizure at our house. And they said, isn't this the girl from Ina Street? And here we are at, eventually at St. Francis Hospital. And in a ward with wires up to her head and a number of children who weren't going home in other rooms around her. And so I just to know, we ended up to find out that, oh my God, it's just epilepsy, right? It's just to have that particular experience. But the fact that we had the pastoral care that was there and that people were there in order to be able to relate to us, I just want you to know how much that support is really worthwhile to us who have young children. So yes, it does show, and I want to go ahead and say thank you for that pastoral care, please. Yes. I hear and I don't know, and if you can do this without the piece of paper, do you have a favorite passage from Scripture that you like to pray with?
Yeah, I like Matthew's Gospel where it's ask and we'll grant it to you, seek and you shall find, knock and the door will be open. That's my fallback to prayer because we need to ask God for what we need, and when I have nothing else to pray with, I go back to that one and try to recite that in my head over and over again because it gives me hope that we need to ask God and be persistent at that, and hopefully things will get God's answer, and it may be part of prayer to accept what we're not expecting, and we get that as well, and try to move past that. Some of my worst experiences with my kids and then also with those at the hospital are what can happen after that, even when negative things happen, how God provides in the long term, and we find positive things coming out of that. But we just can't give up on the power of prayer even when we feel God's not there, because He is.
And of course, what is your biggest challenge when it comes to prayer?
My biggest challenge is taking the time. You get so busy and the world around, things are so much happening that they take the time to pray. One of the obligations with deacons, I pray there's the hours every day, and we pray 3 offices, the morning prayer, evening prayer, and night prayer. So I do pull aside for those, but sometimes it seems automatic, and you're not really into the prayer.
like my daughter's 12-minute rosary.
Yeah, but it pulls me away from my work to be someplace quiet. And then as I pray the office, I'm able to actually sit and think for a while and not focus on the other things around me. My biggest problem is I have a trouble with quiet time. To go in and sit and pray, my mind just takes off almost automatically to some other problem that I'm dealing with, and I can't focus. So I fall back then onto the Liturgy of the Hours to pray that, or to pray just a regular prayer, like the Our Father is one of my favorite prayers, and be able to just recite that and then hope that pulls me in. But my biggest challenge is making the time and making it quality time.
But I think, because, and I'm hoping, well, I'm going to try to put my words to this, is that I think as a therapist and as a Christian, there are things that I hear all the time over and over again, is that, when it comes to meditation, when it comes to prayer, people saying, I just feel like I'm not doing it right. And I'm wondering, what kind of advice might you have for that thought of, I'm not doing it right, or a tip or advice when it comes to prayer?
The one I get to myself is prayer does not have to be perfect. I mean, God's not looking for the exact words. He just wants to hear what your thoughts are. And maybe you can't spend 20 or 30 minutes, you can spend 5 or 10. But you make time that works for you. And that's all I've been able to do. And I try to do that every morning when I get up, either at home at the hospital or in the chapel, and just take 5 minutes just to try to get my day organized and my mind is to have that God help me get through this day and meet the needs of people that I meet. But I think the biggest thing is not push yourself to be perfect, but just speak from the heart, and God understands where we are, and just be sincere and let that happen. But try not to be perfect.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. There you go. Commercial break, thank you. Now, a word from our sponsors.
We said it was a word, not a word you could hear. Don't be so demanding. Well, we tried.
So what were they? Can you recap them? Give a summary of them.
She can read lips.
Davis, can you read right now?
You didn't hear Steve. Steve said he wishes his wife were here because she can read lips.
Let's go ahead and introduce our final guest.
All right, let me go ahead and get my notes here. Keep going through. More. Oh my gosh, it's not there. We have a very, very special guest. Our guest is so special that I put my notes all the way at the end. And, well, we have a special guest, and our special guest is kind of a team this evening. Our special guest is part of a very large family, but she is probably the most beautiful sister in this family, right? But she's not the tallest, and she is all I know is that she wouldn't give me the time of day until one day I gave her a daisy from my garden, and then she decided I was okay to talk to. So, ladies and gentlemen, with the help of her mother, Miss Patsy Bistry. I think this is the more live mic, so why don't you go ahead and take that, Patsy, okay? Patsy. Hello? There we go. Patsy, say hello to everybody.
Hello.
Now, Patsy was so nervous earlier this evening that her mother had to spell the word when she told it to me. So how do you spell nervous? Okay. She's not going to give up on that answer. All right. So Patsy, Patsy, so do you think someday you're going to be as tall as Simeon?
No.
No? No? Okay, who is your funniest sibling?
Justice.
Justice is your funniest sibling? I know these aren't one of the questions there. Why is Justice funny?
I don't know.
You don't know, he's just a funny guy. All right, so maybe he should have been here on this side. All right, so tell you what, I would like to first start, none of the jump around questions. What is your favorite prayer?
The Hail Mary.
Would you say that for us?
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Now, why is that prayer so special to you?
Because the angel came to Mary and he said, Hail Mary, full of grace.
That's right. Those words are actually from an angel. Very, very true. And didn't I hear you say that this is the first prayer that you learned?
Yeah,
Who taught you this prayer?
Mom.
Mom, where is she? Right over there? She's the tall lady right next to you? Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Who prays the most in your family?
Mom.
And I've seen your family and understand why. I pray for your family all the time, just because I see them fill the pew. All right, it's got to be hard enough. So the first prayer you ever learned. Tell me, when did you learn that prayer was really about a relationship with God and not about just saying words?
I don't really remember.
You don't really remember. It says you have known, Patsy told us here, I have known my whole life that prayer is being friends with God. I think that's pretty amazing. Your whole life to know that. And I think that's because you also have an excellent example from your family. Don't you think so? Nod for me. No, you're not going to do that? Okay. Kids and pets. All right. What is the hardest thing for you when it comes to praying? What gets in the way?
Being bad.
Being bad? And what does being bad do to your heart?
It turns it bad.
It turns it bad. You use the words that it makes your heart feel icky. Right? Okay? But if your heart is icky, you don't want to pray. But then what do?
I go see Jesus and it helps me a lot.
It helps you a lot. Does it change anything in you?
It changes my heart.
Most definitely. Isn't that beautiful? It changes your heart. Okay, when's the best time for you to pray, Patsy?
In the morning, and in the morning it's sometimes dark in the big church.
Okay. The big church. Can you tell us about the difference between the big church and the little church and what you call the differences? What are those two different places?
The big church is where we do mass and stuff.
Yes.
And the little church is, the chapel.
The adoration chapel. So there's the little church and the big church. I love it. Many of our guests have actually gone ahead and said, we haven't discussed this yet, that their favorite place to pray is in the church. And for you, there's a big reminder. What is that you see something and it reminds you to pray. What is that?
The cross.
The cross. Who's up there?
Jesus.
Jesus. What is it particularly about the cross that tells you that you have to pray? Or you should pray? Or that makes you want to pray?
It just reminds me of Jesus, and then I get reminded to pray more and to pray.
Most definitely. Most definitely. There's a big sacrifice that God made for us. right? He died on the cross for us, most definitely. Now, your life got very special at a particular point, and I'd like you to go ahead and talk to me, or talk to our audience, about some experiences that you've had that many people may not have had the experience when it comes to prayer. Do you have some visitors?
I seen Mary.
You saw Mary. So you've actually had a visit from our mother. And of course, musical accompaniment for that same as no. So you've seen Mary. How many times have you seen Mary?
Like once or twice.
Once or twice. And our Lord appeared to you as well? So how many times have you seen Jesus?
Like once or twice.
My goodness gracious. Did our mother or Jesus say anything to you?
Mary said something, but I forgot.
Ah. Well, sometimes Mary goes ahead, because I know, like at Fatima, she told them not to share. So maybe that's what was happening too, right? Okay, all right, that's very, very special. Do you have any advice for the people here when it comes to praying? When should they pray?
Maybe sometime in the morning.
In the morning, okay. But you mostly said also to pray every day, right? And also to visit who every day?
Jesus.
And how do you visit Jesus?
We sometimes we go in the church
In the
and
church.
we sit right in front of where Jesus is. And
Most definitely, I see you out there, yeah.
yeah, and we just pray and think about God and pray for people.
Okay. I got a question. How hard is it to pray when Jojo is kissing your mother 1,000 times? He's a kissy guy, isn't he? Does he kiss you?
A lot.
You like it?
No.
All right. Now, everybody here also, now you're very young, but you have had a whole bunch of people, and you list a few here, these people who have been role models for you in prayer. You mind telling us who a few of those are?
Mary.
Mary herself, very good, okay. How about people in the parish?
Mrs. Lowe.
Okay. Who else is an inspiration to you?
Kaylee.
Okay.
Mrs. Timmy. Mrs. Mead. Mrs. Tracy.
A lot of people out there. And who is Tom?
Milo.
She misunderstood you. She thought you said who was tall.
Who is Tom? Tom.
Milo's tall.
Milo. Oh, hey, so yes, Milo is very tall. Yes. If you need anything off the top shelf, call Milo. Most definitely. Yes. But so you know who Tom? Who is Tom?
The guy who works at the church and does a lot of stuff, like changes the candles.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. All right. There we go. All right. Changes the candles. Ladies and gentlemen, Patsy.
One more shot. We're going to give this one more shot
One more shot.
while we set up for our next activity,
Most definitely.
our final act. You can hear it this time. Yeah. Can you?
time I was actually in a tour where we used puppets, and the actors were in brown costumes, and the principal the kids couldn't hear us, so the principal decided to bring her wireless mic, and she was holding the microphone up to the mouths of the puppets.
So these wonderful commercials can be viewed on YouTube, and they are reminding us, through some wonderful testimonies from parishioners, from some of you all, how the rosary and adoration are wonderful ways to pray, and also how we have a great experience coming up, October 19th, the Day of Recollection. So at this time, we'll let Dave introduce our final activity.
First of all, a big hand for all of our panelists this week. Thank you very much. So, just a really quick one, just to like, your favorite prayer. Which is your favorite prayer?
My favorite prayer, it'd have to be the
Hail
Hail Mary.
Mary, okay. Next.
Well, I like to do the rosary, so I'd say Hail Mary.
So she likes 40 Hail Marys.
I think our Father.
Okay.
The Memorare.
Ooh, she's going out there. Memorare. We've got fists pumping in the air for the Memorare out there. And
Hail Mary.
Hail Mary's the winner, ladies and gentlemen. Hail Mary. Okay, now we're going to have a game. Anybody ever watch Password or Password Plus? I actually got to watch Password Plus in California with Loretta Swift as one of the guests. Most definitely, yes. Hot Lips Houlihan. So, and I was 13, so that meant a lot to me. All right. So the next game is Password. It's going to be a little bit, so we're going to take two of our celebrity guests over here, and they are going to go ahead and take a couple of the seats up here. So, I don't know if you're going to go along with her, Patsy, or not, so you take one of these two over here, one of these two, and we have two guests from our audience who've already been pre-selected. You're please going to come up, and we got Chuck Hansen and Shelley Gorans. Big hand for them. Now, decide in between each of you who is going to give the clue and who is going to give the answer. And this is very important. For a very short period of time, the password will appear on the screen behind them. We know that all of you can read. We don't want you to now. So if
Not out loud.
not out loud, right? So if you really, really need to, make sure that you have your hand over your mouth so that no one can go ahead and say what that particular word is, all right? And now Father is going to go ahead and give us the rules of competition.
So, contestants, you will have an envelope which will tell you what the password is, and you can give a one-word clue, no more. Probably will say no less, too, because otherwise it just won't work. One-word clue, and then your partner gets one chance to try to then guess the password for 10 points. If they don't receive it, then it goes to the next team, who's still on the same password for 8 points. But your clue might help you as well, etc., because then it goes to 6 points, 4 points, etc. And it is very important to not turn around and look at the screen. And I will just re-emphasize to the audience that it is very important that nobody say the password out loud. At this time, I will give the envelopes to the first contestant.
John and I are starting to pray again.
And if Father should say the password is, don't fill in the blank. A little password music maybe, a little lead in. Oh, we got it already, let's go.
The password is...
Okay, all right, who's going first? Deacon John, please open, you feel free to open your envelope.
Oh, I have one for one.
Rosary?
All right.
All right. Number 2. The password is...
Okay, go. Go, Rachel.
It's the same, I have the same.
So the next word.
Oh, I didn't give you number 2 yet.
We'll take it.
We'll do whatever we want. I'm not sure we needed to seal the envelope, so.
H2O.
I guess chemical compounds are one word. All right. Password number 3, gravity. Password number 3. You gotta stop making these things round.
The password is...
One word.
I think it's illegal.
Give him number 4. So far, everybody's gotten 10 points, so...
4. All right. Rachel, you go first.
The password is...
Queen.
King.
I told you you should have put Lecto Divina in there.
It just might get interesting.
All right. 5.
The password is... Not that one again. That one.
Paul?
He said, he said horse.
Okay.
Ass.
That is the last time you will hear the word ass in this song. I guess that one was.
One next clue.
Would you hold that for me? Thank you very much. Yeah, I don't need a mic. There we go. Yes, it reminds me of a story. When I was going through school,
Now me first?
yes, you were first, but before you do that, when I was going through school, the teacher, or the nun at that particular time, would say, Mr. Roden, we can hear you. Mr. Roden, your voice carries. Mr. Roden, your voice is prominent. And then I got married, and my wife said, what?
The password is...
Canola.
Sweet roll.
Canola, sweet roll.
Canola. He said sweet roll.
Oil.
All right.
And it's officially 28-28, so this is the tiebreaker as expected.
All right, here we go.
The password is...
You,
Oh, okay.
right?
Well, oh, you got you could win with this one.
But
It's 28-28,
Oh, we go first?
and they just won.
They got the last one right, yeah.
So who gets
So,
it? Deacon?
Deacon goes first.
Deacon goes first, okay? Never contradict the priest.
Brains.
hear it. He said brains. It doesn't matter what she says. Brains. Can I use a variation of the?
No.
The audience has spoken.
Solomon.
Ah.
Solomon. King Solomon.
Wisdom.
And ladies and gentlemen, that is St. Louis Live Password Plus. And our winners, and our losers, and our wonderful competitors. Everybody, big hand all the way up. Pick up these envelopes. Uh-oh, looks like everybody's doing it for you. Oh, yes. This would have been really awkward if Patsy had to kiss Deacon John.
We'll let Angela do that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. If I can get a little help, go clearing these out. Okay. So I might have to go a little bit off script here because we talked about our favorite prayers. And I said, but I was wondering. Let's see. Oh, because I've gone through a lot of the questions on here. I want you to know that everybody went ahead and, for the most part, wrote their answers. Of course, Patsy got a little bit of help from her mom. Steve apparently got a little bit of a help from his wife, and both Jeannie and Deacon John both wrote an autobiography for me that is going to be published later on this month. So, we've talked a little bit about this, but what was it about? How did you learn how to pray? We've talked a little bit about that, Steve, but let's start with Jeannie. Jeannie, how did you learn how to pray, and how has it changed over time?
Well,
Let me get you have a mic over there someplace, or to get taken away? I'll go ahead and give you mine right now.
Well, again, being in a Catholic school I didn't go to kindergarten. My mom wouldn't let me. She didn't let me go to school. But anyway, being at St. Joe's, the Baltimore Catechism, we had to learn it word for word, because when we finally made our confirmation, the bishop would come in, or the Monsignor, I think it was actually, and ask us a question on this thick Baltimore Catechism, and we had to recite it word for word. And we were threatened if we didn't, we wouldn't get to make our confirmation, which was sort of a fib, but we didn't know it at the time. So that's where basically...
Judgmental God threatened. This is so far, what a beautiful experience many people have had with the Catholic Church. But one thing I have to say is that I actually took my code a little bit wrong, because maybe we can have this discussion at some other time, because we've had such a wonderful time that we went a half an hour longer than we're supposed to. So I want to go ahead and have a big hand for all our guests, for one. And the next thing is that I want to go ahead and say a big hand for the community that is St. Louis Catholic Church, and not as only live, but alive with prayer. Thank you very much. And thank you for coming out. Thank you guys.